So today I want to do something a little bit different than kind of my normal content. And I want to discuss some of my own personal gaming history that maybe not a lot of you know about. And it's something that I certainly have referenced on the channel, but I've never really dived deep into. And I feel like some of you guys will probably find interesting. I think a lot of people probably won't find this interesting. I don't expect this to be like a widely viewed video on my channel or anything, but I think it's pretty cool. And it's something that I've been thinking about doing and discussing for a while. And today just kind of felt like the right time to do it. And I want to discuss some of my time working for GameStop. So like I'd mentioned, I have definitely brought up in the past the fact that I had worked for GameStop in some live streams or videos whenever it has felt relevant to say. It's something I've touched on and a lot of you guys have heard. But again, I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk about my time because, you know, a few years ago, it was really common on YouTube to see people uploading and making videos discussing their time working for GameStop and why it was horrible and terrible and it sucked and they're a bad company. And that was like the thing to do. And I saw tons of those videos recommended to me. Like I said, upwards of a few years ago. I feel like maybe that trend has passed. I'm not quite sure. I certainly wouldn't follow a lot of that stuff. But again, it was common. And I thought it was interesting because I know the company has changed a lot over the years. And every time I would see one of those videos uploaded, and I maybe watched parts of one or two of those videos, I never really dived into them, but every time I would see one, all I would think to myself was, I had a great time working for GameStop. In fact, it's probably my favorite job I've ever had. But of course, the caveat is that for me, I worked at GameStop in the early 2000s, from 2002 to 2005. So the bulk of the sixth generation of consoles, PlayStation 2, Xbox, GameCube, and even Dreamcast. The first year I worked for GameStop, we still had Dreamcast games, and we sold used Dreamcasts and used Dreamcast games and controllers and whatnot, which was pretty cool. So, you know, I worked at the company in such a different era compared to nowadays, and even over the past 10 years, and people making videos about why working for GameStop was awful, and again, why they were a bad company. You go back further ago, you go back 20 to 25 years, and again, my experiences were almost entirely positive. I thought I would recall and discuss some of my favorite memories from working there, and yeah, I thought it was great. The quick version of how I even started working at GameStop is that, again, this is 2002, and it was the day after my 22nd birthday, which was July of 2002. So in July 2002, I turned 22. And it was the day after my birthday, I went into the local GameStop that I had discovered the year prior and bought a couple of games from. I purchased Resident Evil Remake from there. I purchased Eternal Darkness from there. There was a Need for Speed game for GameCube or whatever. I went in there the day after my birthday looking at, like, they had some Star Wars figures. I even still have these figures in a box in my garage. They had some of those there, and I was just looking around, and I bought one and was just sparked up a conversation with the manager. She really liked me. She said, I want to interview you for a job. We have a third key position open, and you might be really good for it. And so the timeline gets fuzzy for me at this point. But within the following weeks of that, again, this is like the day after my birthday, I interviewed, I got the job, I was hired as the third key manager as a 22-year-old. At the time, I was working for Subway, because before I worked for Subway, I was running a drum shop within a larger musical instrument store that was local to Colorado. This is when I lived in the Denver, Lakewood, Littleton area of Colorado. And I worked at a local music shop there, ran the drum department, loved that job. It got me into the music scene and the music industry that I'm still involved in today. But I needed a change when I was like 21 years old and like an idiot, probably, I want to say a month after 9/11, when the job market was not awesome. I just quit that job because I was young and stupid, and then I went to work for Subway to just have something easy to do for a while, which then led me to shopping at GameStop the day after my birthday, and then getting the job interview and getting hired. And so yeah, at 22 years old, I found myself the third key manager at a GameStop, and I was like, wow, I'm working for a video game store? I'm selling people Nintendo and PlayStation games. and I was, I'd get shipments of new games and I'd put them out and I'd talk to people about games and they'd come in and ask me, oh, what system should I buy for my kids, or what system should I buy for me? And I was such a Nintendo and GameCube fanboy at the time. I guarantee you guys, I sold more GameCubes for Nintendo than Nintendo ever sold themselves. Because people would come in, especially during the holidays, and say, oh, what should I get for me or my kids or whatever, or my husband or whatever. And it's like, let me walk you over to the GameCube section. What about Pikmin? I know I convinced a lot of people to buy GameCubes at the time over PlayStation 2s and Xbox. And so, yeah, it was a fun time for me in that respect. And it's also important to double down on what I said earlier. It was a different company, man. 2002 to 2005, the practices of the company, the culture of the company, even just the nature of the industry and the hobby and people who played games, all of it was better. This was also pre-smartphone, pre-social media. The internet hadn't even really infected the hobby of gaming itself. So it was just what I would call a more pure experience. Whether it's the games and the consoles you were playing, the conversations you were having with fellow gamers, or working for a company like GameStop, it was so much less infected by a lot of the worst things that happens today in the hobby, ruining games with monetization, broken games, people fighting at each other because the anonymity of the internet and Twitter and social media lets people just be more shitty to each other than they need to be, and blah, 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 blah. Not to get all preachy. It just, across the board, it was just a better time. And the company didn't really push those greedier practices that they've become known for over the past few years, and that I think led a lot of people to start making their videos about their experiences working for GameStop, where they said it was awful and a terrible company. Because in 2002, they just weren't doing those things. It was really chill and really fun. Hands down, the main memory I need to talk about, the number one thing, my favorite gaming memory of all time, is E3. Because E3 2004, I qualified to go to. And the way it worked at the time, you have to understand, E3 back in the day, in the 2000s, late 90s, 2000s, and even a lot of the 2010s, it was insider only. It was industry only. They started selling tickets to regular people to go, I don't know, like 2016, 2017, 2018, something like that. But up until then, you had to be involved in some way, shape, or form. And so in 2004, at this point, I'd become an assistant manager for GameStop. And you had to go through this process back in the dial-up internet days of accessing a website and proving the credentials that you worked in some sort of entertainment or media industry. Are you going as just a regular attendee, or do you qualify for media? I didn't qualify for media by working for GameStop, but I did qualify to go as an attendee, as did another friend of mine who herself was an assistant manager or maybe a third key at a different store, and she was also a roommate, and then also my girlfriend at the time. So the three of us lived together, myself, my girlfriend, who worked at Suncoast Video, okay, so a video DVD store, and then another GameStop employee. We all qualified based on working in the retail physical media industry, right? GameStop and Suncoast Video. And so we went through the process and we got things printed out and we qualified. And so I got to go to E3 in 2004. We drove from Denver, Colorado to LA. I think at the time it was in May still, before it moved to the June time period. And it was euphoric. It was like the mecca of all things nerdy and gamerdom. And it was just to be there. I just felt so amazingly special and cool, as corny as that sounds. And the three of us had an amazing weekend in LA, going to 3 days of E3, seeing games that people hadn't seen before, seeing the Nintendo DS behind closed door for the first time, playing Metroid Prime 2, playing Resident Evil 4. Halo 2 was behind closed doors, which really, really sucks. But it was the talk of the show is that Halo 2 was there, but no one could play it unless you were like media, like IGN, or Bloomberg probably, or whatever. Whoever else would have been there. It was crazy. And yeah, so E3 2004 is seared into my memory as one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Of the many memories I have from being there, obviously, like I said, playing Metroid Prime 2 and Resident Evil 4 were incredible, especially because they went on to become two of my favorite games. And Metroid Prime had already become my favorite game. So to be there playing Metroid Prime 2 before anyone else on the show floor, the huge Nintendo booth, It was so cool, man. But again, the Nintendo DS was a big deal because there were rumors about the new handheld that was going to be the successor to the Game Boy Advance for a while at the time. Then it was like, again, my memory gets fuzzy going this far back, 20 years, but I want to say that in the months leading up to E3, Nintendo confirmed that what the Nintendo DS was going to be was a handheld that had two screens on it, or multiple screens. And so people were like, what does that mean? No one could picture what that meant. And I remember all these weird mock-ups that were making it onto the internet, the mid-2000s version of like dial-up internet at the time. And so in the Nintendo booth, they allowed people to line up. We had to wait in line for like 2 hours and kind of go through the Nintendo booth. They would bring you into this little theater room. They would play this video. Charles Martinet was there doing his Mario voice, introducing everything. We got to shake his hand and stuff. And they played a little video that, just in a tiny little theater that would have like 20 people at a time, that would show you basically what the DS was. And you're like, oh, it flips open just like a Game Boy Advance, except it's bigger. There's two screens. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, one of them's a touchscreen. Holy crap. And just all this stuff. And then once that little video finished, we got to walk into a room and spend about 15 or 20 minutes at all these different Nintendo DS demo stations and kind of play it. So I remember playing, the main thing I remember, no surprise to you guys, is the Metroid Prime Hunters demo, which was called First Hunt or whatever. So we got to play that there. And I think there was maybe something like Sonic the Hedgehog. I can't remember. Maybe I have pictures of it, but that was amazing because it hadn't been revealed visually to the world. And here we were, three nerds from Colorado who just worked at like GameStop and DVD stores, and we were there behind closed doors playing the Nintendo DS before anyone else. It was so amazing. Speaking of Metroid Prime, a really cool, fun thing that I remembered from my time there is my manager, the main manager I worked with for the bulk of my 3 or 4 years working at GameStop. She went to in 2002, she went to the managers conference. GameStop would bring all the store managers to one location, maybe Texas, I don't remember where it was, every year. And they'd have, for a few days, they would see all these presentations from game companies. And it would be very common for these game companies to give all the GameStop managers special things. Like my first year working for GameStop in 2002, she was given an Xbox. Every single manager was given a brand new original Xbox, which at the time was only like a year old, and it was bleeding edge technology. This was like the hottest, craziest new thing was the new Xbox. And Microsoft gave every GameStop store manager an Xbox to take home. And I think at one point maybe GameCubes were given out to people too. And in 2002, she was given a voucher for a free copy of Metroid Prime by Nintendo. Nintendo said every store manager gets a copy of Metroid Prime, which is coming out it was September, I believe. And so when she got back, she kept things like the Xbox and whatnot, but she would also give us things, or I think she had us play like a fighting game for fun in the store and be like, whoever wins this match is going to get this prize or whatever. And I don't remember how it happened, but it ended up that she ended up giving me her Metroid Prime. And so, fast forward a few months and Metroid Prime finally comes out and she's able to have a copy for herself. And it was mine. She gave it to me. And so, you guys know, that's my favorite game of all time. And my access to that game the very first time came from working for GameStop. My store manager was given a free copy from Nintendo to own, but she gave that to me. At that time, I was still a third key. I was her third key manager, the biggest Nintendo fan in the store. I talked about Nintendo and the GameCube more than anyone else. And so she gave me Metroid Prime, and little did I know that game was going to change my life forever. Something else that is one of the coolest things I ever got to do was travel to the airport and then to other GameStops, dropping off copies of The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker when that released in, I want to say it was March of 2003. Again, North America. And so the way that worked is I obviously was very close with the store manager, and I had a great time working for GameStop because I was good at the job and I got a lot of recognition, and it was just really cool. So her and I were close, and so her and her husband, because she was one of like the leading managers of our district, when The Wind Waker was coming out, I don't know why this happened, but they were delivered by pallet in like a bunch of boxes for the whole district of GameStop to the airport, to DIA, Denver International Airport, which is like an hour away from the city for anyone who knows the area. It was very far away. And she one day was tasked with, this was probably a few days before the game was coming out. She was tasked with going to the airport, picking up all these boxes, and then she had like manifests and inventory sheets saying this store gets this many boxes, this store gets this many boxes. And so her and her husband, who didn't work for GameStop, but it was her husband, so I think he drove. They were going to go pick up all these boxes of Wind Waker to drive around and drop off to the district, and she allowed me to come with and be a part of that journey. And I was so excited for the Wind Waker. I'm going to make another video about the journey of the Wind Waker and all that stuff too, but I was really excited, and it was another thing she let me do. And so I'll never forget the day. And again, I was 22, about to turn 23. This was such an amazing experience to do as a young person. I felt way more special than I needed to. We drove to the airport. We picked up all these boxes of this amazing new game that I myself was nerding out over. But then I got to be a part of delivering it to the stores, which would bring it to the people. And so we drove to the airport. We picked up these boxes. We had our sheets. I was allowed to open a box and take out my copy, which was also amazing. And then, yeah, we drove to all the different stores in the district with all these boxes of this like brand new game before the release date, just sitting next to me in the car. It was crazy. And in the trunk, I was like, this is amazing that this is just all right here. This is the new Zelda game. And there's like, 300 copies right here, whatever. And we drove around and and I got to be a part of bringing it into each store. Like, hey, I'm Rob. I work for this, work with this person at this store. And here are your copies of Wind Waker. Everyone signs and confirms they got what they needed and blah, blah, blah. Bob's your uncle. The people got their Wind Waker. And like, I gush about the Wind Waker. It's my favorite Zelda game of all time. It's definitely in my top 3 all-time video games. And I also think it's pretty amazing that because of my time working for GameStop, I got to be a part of something like that. Now, the last memory I want to bring up, and I have a bonus one at the end, but my last main GameStop-related memory is another huge one, and it's the release of Halo 2. And the reason that's such a big deal is Halo 2 was the first time GameStop ever did a midnight launch for a video game, because Halo 2 was the biggest thing on planet Earth. It was the biggest thing in the solar system, in the Milky Way galaxy. Halo frickin' 2, the people needed their Master Chief, and the hype and the build-up and the excitement for Halo 2 was titanic. It could not be measured. 10.0 on the Richter scale is amazing, man. And November 9th, 2004. I mean, if you were there, you know the date, man, that Halo 2 released. And so it was a big deal for GameStop to organize the first ever midnight release. And this was a time where I was now an assistant manager. So my responsibilities were greater towards making sure our stores went smoothly. I'm obviously jumping back and forth. I spent the first year and a half as a third key, and then I got promoted to assistant manager. And I was about to become a store manager when I left the company in 2005, but whatever. And so at this point, I was an assistant manager at a different store, but working for the same manager because she transferred over later. And so we had to prepare, every store had to prepare for Halo 2. There were conference calls all the time about how you're going to do this is what we're going to do, please do that, yada, 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 organize it this way, plan for this. Even the idea of having people come and pay for their copies early, but then come back and get in line at midnight, and we're going to walk them through the store and hand them what they paid for. That was all done back in 2004 for Halo 2. And that was setting the template, basically, for doing that. And our store had the second most reservations in our district. It was like 250 or 300 copies. It was obscene, like so many. And then people reserved strategy guides at the time too, so that was a really big deal. God, I miss those days, man. If you weren't around in the 90s and the 2000s to experience gaming, I feel bad for you. It's not your fault. No one can change when they were born, but you missed out on the golden age of gaming, man. It was so cool. So copies of Halo 2, copies of strategy guides, bundling them together, this, that, and the other. And what's interesting about that is, like, the month before Halo 2 released, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was releasing. And that was almost as big as Halo 2. There was massive hype for that. You know, if our store had 300 reservations for Halo 2, we probably had maybe, 200, 175 or 200 for GTA San Andreas, which was also unheard of. Like, those two games were the biggest releases of my entire time working for GameStop. Wind Waker's pretty close, by the way, for fellow Nintendo fans. Wind Waker is close, but it didn't really touch San Andreas or Halo 2. And so, because GTA was like a couple weeks before Halo 2, we also used GTA as like a dry run. And so we didn't do a midnight release for San Andreas, but what every store did, because there were still a ton of reservations, was, I can't remember if we opened early, but we did a during store hours thing where like we still set up and tested the same idea. People who are here to pick up San Andreas, we're going to check you out early. We're going to have you line up outside. Again, at this point, it was during the day, or the morning. Line up outside. We put tape to walk people through the store. You go in this way around to pick up your copy and then exit and blah, blah, blah. And we set it up with like caution tape and fake dead bodies on the ground, like chalk outlines, just to have fun with it and make it themed like Grand Theft Auto. And so I also have that memory tied to Halo 2 is like the dry run for San Andreas, and then a month later, the midnight release for Halo 2, where we closed the store at 9. We stayed there. We ordered pizza for us and also for the people coming to buy the games. And we had people line up. We had 200, 300 people outside, and I knew everybody. Everyone knew me because, I knew all the regulars. We talked about gaming all the time. So I was going out there into the line, handing people like, Coke cans and pizza and checking names off lists. And everyone's like, Rob, dude, what's up? Oh my God, Halo 2, are you excited? Yeah, man, I can't wait. It's so cool. And it was just like a big party. It was just a huge party. And being an employee at GameStop and an assistant manager, again, who knew all the regulars, it was so much fun. And then midnight rings. People are getting their Halos. They're screaming in the streets, run into their cars to go home and start playing Halo 2 right away. Man, it was the coolest. So I mentioned I had one bonus story to tell. And that is that one day, a guy came in with a box of stuff, old video game stuff, an old video game console and some games. And it was like a cardboard box without the top on it. And he was like, hey, I want to sell this for some cash. He didn't want to trade it in. He wanted to sell it. And it was a console we did not take because it was very old and it was very rare and it was not successful or common at all. And I was like, man, we do not take that. But I really want it. And that console, you can tell where this is going because he obviously sold this to me. That console was this bad boy. A Virtual Boy. It's really dusty, so I don't know if that's coming through here because it normally sits up on this thing above me here. And I didn't want to dust it off, but it was this Virtual Boy with a controller and like 3 games. And can I set this so it sits here? Nah, it's not going to work. But yeah. I was like, we do not take that, but I want it. How much do you want for it? And I swear to God, I'm not bullshitting you guys when I say this, $40. $40. I'm going to guess, because of the store I was at, this was probably 2004, maybe early 2005 that this happened. $40. I had another person there. I was like, dude, I'm going to go to the ATM, watch the store. I went to an ATM. I got 40 United States dollars. And in 2004, I handed a man $40 for a Virtual Boy and 3 games, a working Virtual Boy. Are you kidding me? They sell for like $500 or $700 nowadays. But at the time, this dude just had one. And he was like, $40. Deal, man. A freaking deal. Call it a deal. I got myself a Virtual Boy. So, yeah, I mean, these are just some of my favorite memories. And this was a conversation, like I said, I've been wanting to have for probably like 2 years. I've been thinking about doing this. And it's not to like defend GameStop. That's not even what I'm doing here, especially because modern GameStop, and I still go there and I shop there and I've got a couple games reserved. I went to pick up my Switch 2 at midnight there. I still like using the store because I want to support physical media, and a store that's dedicated to physical video games still has value. But obviously, the way the company has operated the past many years and tried to adjust to the changing climate in business, some of their decisions have not been the best. They've not been the most consumer friendly. They've, had their fair share of controversies, but it's again, it's not to defend them. It's just to kind of share a different perspective because 5 years ago, everyone was sharing their own experiences on why working there was terrible. And as I said at the beginning, my experience in 2002 to 2005 was not the same. I actually left the company. It was like mid 2005. I can remember it based on two events, okay? One is it was soon after Revenge of the Sith came out because I remembered going with a bunch of my fellow employees and friends and my girlfriend at the time to go see Revenge of the Sith, which was May 2005. And I still worked for GameStop, but not for much longer. So it was after May of 2005. And we had just started taking pre-order reservations for the Xbox 360 because that came out in November 2005, a few months later. So between Revenge of the Sith in May and the Xbox 360 in November of 2005, sometime in there I left. I'm going to guess like it was probably in July, I want to say. I guess 20 years ago, so who frickin' knows? Literally 20 years ago. 2005 was 20 years ago. So yeah, it was really cool that the next generation was about to start, and we'd been seeing Game Informer magazine showing pictures of like Oblivion on the 360. We were like, those trees look real. How is that even possible? It was so exciting, man. And so I didn't get to work through the launch of the 360, unfortunately. But I was taking reservations for a few months before I left. I did work through the launches of the Nintendo DS and the PSP, also the N-Gage. These are things that launched that I was a part of. Other big releases I can think of, WoW, back when physical PC games were a big thing. People coming to pick up WoW, Resident Evil 4 for the GameCube, God of War, and who knows what else. I didn't prepare a list in my head. But those are just some of the ones kind of jumping out, in my mind. And so, yeah, my memories are positive. It was a great time for gaming. It was a better time for gaming, and it was a better time for the company. My experiences were great. I went to E3 for crying out loud. Are you kidding me? Incredible. I still have so many pictures and memories from that time. And seeing the reveal of Twilight Princess there, I didn't even talk about that, but that was another massive deal from E3 in 2004. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess this was just for me to take a trip down memory lane and share some cool stories with you guys. So, I know this video won't be for everybody, but I hope you enjoyed watching and listening. And, yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.